Lawmakers in Banjul on Monday approved the Prevention and Prohibition of Torture Bill 2020. Stay tuned for the details. Survivors of last month's earthquake disaster that struck Turkey and Syria remained in dire conditions. And Saudi Arabia and Iran have mended, of course, relations after years of diplomatic row. Well, this and more coming your way on The World Today. This is Eyeafrica TV, and you are watching the World Today News Bulletin, coming to you live from our studios in Banjul. Many thanks for joining us. I am Amadou Kante, and now the news in detail. And let's begin with parliamentary matters, because the National Assembly members on Monday adopted the report of the Standing Committee on Human Rights and Constitutional Matters on the Prevention and Prohibition of Torture Bill 2020. The bill was presented by the chairperson of the Select Committee on Human Rights and Constitutional Matters. It could be recalled that a carryover motion by the Attorney General and Minister of Justice on the said bill was accepted by the Parliament. Thus, the report on the bill is a continuation of where it stopped in the 5th legislature. Yahya Jammeh tells us more of that in this report.
The torture bill contains issues of torture and inhumane treatment by individuals in the hands of security while in detention or when information is being extracted from them. Torture means any act or omission by which severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental, is intentionally inflicted on a person by or at the instigation of or with the consent or acquiescence of any person, whether acting in an official or private capacity for such purposes as obtaining information or a confession from the person or any other person. The torture bill is still hanging in the arms of Parliament as it is yet to be decided whether it is to be law or not. Presenting the report on the Prevention and Prohibition of Torture Bill 2020, the chairperson of the committee, Honorable Madi Sise, explained some of the omissions and also recommendations that were made during the review of the bill at the committee level.
Honorable Speaker, on the recommendations of the committee, Section 2 and 3 of the cell to amend to read as follows. Mental and psychological acts of torture includes confining the victim in a solitary cell against his or her will with prejudice to his or her security. 3. Pharmacological torture includes administration of drugs to induce confession or reduce mental competence. The use of drugs to induce extreme pain or certain symptoms of diseases, denial or access to medical treatment, and other forms of deliberate and aggravated, cruel, inhuman, or degrading pharmacological treatment or punishment.
Meanwhile, taking turns to debate on the committee's report, parliamentarians present unanimously lauded the Human Rights Committee for its extensive report on the matter. National Assembly member for Busumbala said the bill is timely and it will help to strengthen the legal process of information seeking.
It is only going to strengthen the legal process of obtaining information that are necessary for the prosecutions to rely on in order not to make persons prejudice of their rights in inflicting torture or inhuman and degrading treatments meted on them, as we have been seeing or witnessing in this jurisdiction.
Honorable Alaji S. Dabo, a member of Birkama North and the minority leader, also said the importance of this bill cannot be underestimated, but rather needs some amendments to improve its authenticity.
Honorable Speaker, this bill is very important in the sense that torture as an act or acts has that lacuna in our laws, and therefore it is very difficult to actually charge issues regarding to torture. And this bill has come to address that situation. And going over the report has also enhanced the issues surrounding definition and application of torture in our laws, I have the belief that when we come to the consideration stage, it's going to help us a lot to do the necessary amendment to further enhance the bill to that standard as we yearn for.
Justice Minister Dauda A. Jallow had informed lawmakers that the bill inter alia seeks to provide the legal framework for the prohibition, prevention and the punishment of any form of torture and cruel, inhumane or degrading treatment in the Gambia. The report on the Prevention and Prohibition of Torture Bill 2020 has been adopted by lawmakers and the next stage will be its consideration. If the bill should be enacted by Parliament, it will address unlawful torture, inhumane treatment and other forms of torture. Reporting for Eyeafrica News, I am Mariama Cham.
Moving on, following last month's devastating earthquake that struck Turkey and Syria, some of the survivors in Syria are still struggling for better life and living in the fear of aftershocks. After going through a distressing experience, the survivors are also in a worrisome state about their future amid severe effects of the earthquake disaster. Thousands of people were reported dead and millions were left homeless in the Asian country. Let's have more details of that in this report.
With a few alternatives to what he can call a home, Mohammed Aslan has been living in a tent for the past month after the devastating earthquake robbed him of his home. He struggles to get by day after day with daily necessities such as food, water, and products for basic hygiene a scarce resource. But what Mohammed and many other survivors of the earthquake struggle with the most is fear. Fear that the earthquakes will strike again and that what little they have will be taken away. Fear of what the future holds. Fear that life will never be the same again.
We lived on the 6th floor. The top floor in the building was not serviced and was incomplete. Our homes were damaged and the rooms had cracked walls. They are no longer suitable to live in. Now we have no alternative but to live in a tent. We are getting over the trauma of the earthquake, but now I worry about our safety. We can't sleep because the tents have no doors. They are always open and there is no security or privacy.
Meanwhile, Abdelmanam Najm chose to stay in his house despite the damage brought on by the earthquake.
When the earthquake hit, the whole house cracked from top to bottom. There are cracks in the walls of the kitchen and other rooms. We're afraid that the walls will fall on us. When the earthquake happened, the wall almost exploded.
Ahmed Juma, who has been displaced from his home in Mardat al-Noman, has found shelter in the Mulham village in Azaz. The village was established by the Mulham volunteer team to house those displaced from the border between Syria and Turkey.
When the earthquake happened, we couldn't understand what was going on. When it stopped, came to Mulham village with a few things I had left. There were some administrative problems at first. However, after the village administrator realized my wife had just given birth, they gave us a good house to live in.
In Syria alone, the earthquake has taken over 5,000 lives, while millions more suffer from its impact, with the humanitarian aid still trickling in as a result of the existing conflict and economic crisis that has already been plaguing the country.
And from the reporter in Syria, now back to matters in the African continent, because small and medium enterprises owners in Nigeria have expressed their discontent with the government's move to redesign some of the local currency, which according to them have been affecting their businesses due to the shortage of the new banknotes. According to the authorities, the decision is meant to combat corruption and also to help manage inflation, which is said to be disrupting the country's financial system. An economic analyst, however, observed that the central bank's policy to introduce the new currency was fast-tracked. Here's more details of that in this report.
Months ago, Sarafina Obed operated a point-of-sale business in Jos, but it collapsed when the government swapped old banknotes for new ones.
I've lost a lot of customers. My business is not just the way it used to be. Like things are terribly bad, and then we just want the government to hear our voice and help us so that we'll still retain back our customers. I just want everything to be back on track the way it used to be before the cashless society and the change of currency.
Sarafina now sells clothes to survive, but many small and medium enterprises in Nigeria that rely on cash-based payments have been forced out of business. According to the Association of Mobile Money and Bank Agents in Nigeria, over 80% of its members have shut down operations. Economic analysts argue the decision by the central banks to make changes and circulate new notes was rushed.
You had a good policy, you had good intentions, but it was totally out of place to, first of all, talk about giving a deadline for the change of these currencies when they need to come. You needed to also check your other systems of payments that you didn't actually look at. You already know that we had issues with our technology. In fact, the infrastructure that allows for transfers was already choked.
In October 2022, Nigeria's central bank introduced the redesign of the country's 200, 500 and 1,000 naira notes in its financial system. The policy, according to the authorities, is aimed at fighting corruption, claiming 80% of old banknotes that have been outside the banking system and controlling the money in circulation to manage inflation. Financial analysts say the government needs to ensure enough cash is available and the infrastructure to manage the cash is also strengthened.
The central bank would have introduced a lot more of the new notes and make it available to people, first of all, while you are building your capacity with the banks to make sure that your transfers and online banking systems were working.
Nigeria has an unemployment rate of 33%, and the Nigerian Economic Summit Group projects that it will hit 37% by the end of this year. The Supreme Court in the country in March further directed the central bank to extend the use of banknotes in all the older denominations of the currency until December 31st to reduce the hardship among citizens and businesses. 3 state governors had taken the government to court in February over the scarcity of the old and new naira notes. Some banks have started to comply with the court order to approve the old notes for the next 10 months. But small-scale business owners like Sarafina fear the situation will take a while to return to normal.
And from that finance-related report in Nigeria, now to some of the news. Iran and Saudi Arabia have recently agreed to resume ties after several years of diplomatic row between the two Arab nations. After several attempts, the final round of negotiations brokered the deal was held in China, which has been warmly welcomed by several Arab nations. The normalization of relations between Riyadh and Tehran is expected to be a key turning point for the Middle East and the Muslim world. Here's more details of that in this report.
There was plenty of work behind the scenes before this agreement between Iran and Saudi Arabia was signed. Negotiations were initiated by Oman and Iraq in 2021. Iran and Saudi Arabia held 5 rounds of negotiations, the last round of which was held in Baghdad last May. Everything was ready for the 6th round at a ministerial level, but for several reasons it never went ahead. However, last month, Iran's President Ebrahim Raisi paid a state visit to China, where preparations were made for China to host a final round of negotiations. The fallout goes back June 2016 when Saudi Arabia executed the Shia cleric Sheikh Nimr al-Nimr, who was an outspoken critic of the Saudi monarchy. On the same day, a group of angry protesters attacked the Saudi embassy on this street in Tehran, setting some parts of the building on fire. Following the incident, Riyadh cut diplomatic ties with Tehran. China has described the new understanding between Saudi Arabia and Iran as a victory for peace and dialogue. Oman, Iraq, Qatar, Turkey, and several other countries warmly welcomed the agreement, describing it as a new chapter for the region. Some experts say it could prove to be a major turning point.
Iran and Saudi Arabia are two regional powers that can totally change the Middle East in terms of U.S. hegemony if they stand together.
Iran's Foreign Minister Hossein Amir-Abdollahian says Iran's neighborhood policy is a key element in President Raisi's foreign policy. According to Iran's top diplomat, normalization of ties between Tehran and Riyadh will provide huge advantages for both as well as for the Muslim world.
And you are watching the World Today News Bulletin on Eyeafrica TV, coming to you live from our studios in Banjul. And from that report there, we now take a break and come back shortly. Welcome back. This is Eyeafrica TV and you are watching the World Today News Bulletin. And once again, many thanks for joining us. Let's now look at the rest of the stories. Now, concerns are growing in Kenya due to the rising sea levels that is affecting the country's coastal line. As the situation prevails, experts warn that the coastal destruction could deteriorate, leaving some of the stakeholders, such as the fishermen, worried about the situation. Let's have more details of that in this report.
It is projected that in the next 8 years, 200 million homes across the globe will be underwater. But for some in Kenya, this is already a reality. Along the shores of the Indian Ocean, Joseph Gashango walks through the ruins of Mwembe Lodge, where he once worked as the hotel's manager.
The story began when the water rose bit by bit, but the destruction began in 2014 when the first building collapsed. Then the following two, and so they fell one after the other until the last building of the 9 we had and the 2-story building we had went down.
In the last decade, Kipini, a remote coastal town where the lodge is located, had been growing as a tourist destination for its untouched beaches.
This place here is called the Tana Delta. It is where one of Kenya's longest rivers joins the Indian Ocean, River Tana. It is beautiful, and especially when viewed from the skies.
But parts of Kipini are facing an existential threat. Trees along the once stable shore have been uprooted and washed away. Experts say the coastal erosion could worsen.
Over the last 5 years, we've nearly lost more than 50 meters of, the land to the sea in Kipini.
Climate change is not an abstract notion for coastal habitats. Omar Bashir is a fisherman. He has seen firsthand the effects of rising seawater.
And now fresh fish have disappeared. They are dying because they can't survive in an alkaline environment. Not so long ago, we could catch lots of fresh fish, but today the situation is bad.
Look, too salty. And this affirms claims by fishermen here. They say that the waters of the Indian Ocean have been rising, pushing back the water of River Tana. So literally, this water here is from the sea.
Like in many coastal towns and villages, the people of Kipini are already planning adaptation measures to cope with climate change.
Because of the changing climatic conditions, we do not have rainfall. So a lot of the farming activities have actually moved actually closer to the river to be able to support some of those, irrigation activities. You can't irrigate using seawater. So this is making, of course, the communities a lot more vulnerable.
They are planting mangroves and other vegetation to absorb water. They are also asking the local administration of Tana River County to build seawalls, hoping they will be in time to stem the rising tides.
And from the report in Kenya, finally let's come back home now and do some sports-related matters. Because the 2023 National Athletics Championship Finals is set to take place at Bottrop Junior and Senior Secondary Schools in Brikama in the West Coast region due to the ongoing renovation works at the Independence Stadium. Now, at a news conference on Tuesday, Gambia's Secondary School Sports Association officials said the sporting competition will be held at Bottrop for the first time ever and will feature more than 800 high schools, athletes from 95 schools across the regions of the Gambia. Moses Mendy has more details of that in this report.
Several middle and high school athletes will on Thursday gather at Bottrop Football Ground in Brikama, West Coast region for the commencement of the highly anticipated track and field events in the annual National Athletic Championship set to take place from March 17 to 19, 2023. Over 90 schools across all the regions will be competing for glory in this year's National Athletic Championship that has been largely dominated by Bottrop over the years. Spectators and supporters of the various schools will see more than 800 athletes in action during the series of events to be competed for. Speaking at the Tuesday press conference, Chairman of Competitions explains that the Gambia Secondary School Sport Association is already mobilizing resources in preparation for the sporting event.
The tradition, the Secondary School Sports Association, you are all aware, is not sponsored. Finances is done by the Secondary School Sports Association. And in these finals, the athletes that are coming from Fonyi, North Bank, LRR, CRR, URR, all those schools, the athletes and their coaches are to be hosted by the Secondary School Sports, meaning on Thursday, we are expecting all those athletes, 342 athletes and coaches, to assemble at Bottrop, where the Secondary School Sports will provide feeding for them and accommodation on Thursday to Sunday. The rest of the country, that is Greater Banjul and KM, West Coast part in the Combos, the schools that qualify will be traveling to the venue daily. Although we have given them the opportunity that whoever wants to camp in Brikama, the local organizing committee will see schools where they will identify for them to come to avoid the crisscrossing daily from Brikama to Banjul or any other area.
He said participating schools will know their lanes by Thursday night, adding that each event will be allocated an amount of time to avoid tardiness. Ismaila Cisse, president of the Gambia Secondary School Sport Association, dwelled on malpractices and age fraud, saying schools often file ineligible athletes who have either outlived their time in high school or are non-schoolgoers. The association, he said, adopted a stern stance on malpractices and cheating, but schools often explore new ways of cheating. Mr. Cisse, however, stressed that the union is committed to fishing out and suspending any school found wanting.
So that is why we started sanitizing the competition from last year. And this year too, we taught last year lessons all the schools would have learned, although they have learned some lessons because some of them we decided to go extra mile to at least follow a particular athlete that transferred to their school from one school to the other. Their previous schools, they have been following them to get records straight. But also we realize is that some schools will do connive at that level in order to at least tamper with the records, in order to at least adjust records at their level so that a particular school can be favored, especially a senior secondary school. So these are new levels of cheating. The moment you start shutting this door, they open another door or another window. So we're always following them in order to ensure that all the doors of cheating and windows are all closed so that nobody will have the opportunity. They will use the right athletes of the right age who are going to school. We want students to participate in our competition. Non-students, we don't want them to participate in our competition.
Defending champions Bakote and Sincho Balia are set to miss out on the prestigious school competition until 2026. The two were in the regional finals. Several schools such as Mingdao, Jambanjeli, Njabakunda, Charles Jau, Kotu and Wise are all under the microscope for possible foul play and risk missing out if culpable. The cash awards for winners is tapped from the teachers' union account. Mr. Cisse therefore solicited financial support if the cash awards are to be increased. Ticket prices for the 2023 Athletic Championship have been set at $100. For Eyeafrica News, I am Moses Imende.
Yes, from the report by Moses Imende, of course, on the 2023 Athletics Championship Finals, we now eventually bring this news edition to an end. But for more details on this and other stories, as always, as ever, you can visit on our website on Eyeafrica.tv. But for now, many thanks for the pleasure of your company. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and do have a pleasant evening. Bye for now.